You remember the smell before you remember the name. That faint trace of smoke that clung to denim, the old truck seat, the diner booth after midnight. Maybe it was your dad leaning against the hood of his car, a red pack folded in his shirt sleeve. Maybe it was your mom, driving with one hand on the wheel and the window cracked open, wind catching her hair as smoke trailed behind her. Those weren't just cigarettes, they were time markers, symbols of confidence, class, rebellion, and belonging. Now they're gone. Names that once filled every pocket and ashtray, now vanished like the jukebox songs that played beside them. Lark, Territon, Old Gold, Chesterfield, Viceroy, Lucky Strike. Pall Mall, Vantage, Bel Air, Parliament, each carried its own identity, its own attitude, its own era. Back then, every flick of a lighter meant something. A pause between words, a shared silence, a ritual in motion, smoke curling in the glow of dashboard lights while voices drifted into the night. It wasn't about addiction, it was about connection. These brands didn't just burn, they defined decades. They lived in glove boxes, coat pockets, and coffee-stained counters. And when they disappeared, they took something more than tobacco with them. They took an America that moved slower, talked longer, and noticed more. Tonight, we're lighting a match for memory. 10 vanished cigarette brands that once defined who we were and who we still miss becoming. You can still see it. The glow of an ember in the dark, a small orange light cutting through the night air. Maybe it was your father's hand outside the car window, flicking ash into the wind as the radio played. Maybe it was a stranger at a bar, leaning back in silence after a long day's work. Cigarettes weren't just smoke back then. They were punctuation marks in the rhythm of American life. Before the world became filtered and careful, every brand had a story. A taste, a look, a crowd that called it their own. And behind every pack was a promise, identity. The first name most people remember is Lucky Strike. The green pack that went to war, then came home red. During World War II, the company changed its color to Lucky Strike Green has gone to war, because the chromium in the green ink was needed for military supplies. It wasn't just a brand move, it was patriotism in a box. Soldiers carried them overseas, tucked into shirt pockets, shared them in foxholes. When they came home, they brought the habit with them. Lighting a Lucky meant you were part of something bigger. If your grandfather smoked, there's a good chance that pack sat in his pocket. The sound of that paper crinkle meant pause. It meant peace after labor. It meant routine. Lucky Strike wasn't fancy, it was honest. It carried the smell of sweat, diesel, and determination. Then there was Old Gold, the brand that promised something different. Not a cough in a carload, their slogan said, bold as ever. You saw those golden packs in every glove box, every gas station counter, every movie theater balcony. Old Gold wasn't about toughness, it was about ease, about leisure. A name for a generation that wanted to feel refined after years of struggle. People forget now, but Old Gold was built on attitude. Its ads were playful, confident, a wink at the modern world. If Lucky Strike was the soldier's smoke, Old Gold was the dreamer's. It found its place in diners and drive-ins between milkshakes and jukebox songs. You can almost picture it, a couple in a '57 Chevy, the boy lighting one for the girl, the smoke catching in the glow of dashboard chrome. And then came Chesterfield, the everyman cigarette, straightforward, square pack. Clean lines, no tricks. Its taste was sharp, its name solid. It belonged to the worker, the farmer, the man in rolled-up sleeves who built the post-war America we still talk about. When Sinatra lit a Chesterfield, it meant something. It wasn't rebellion. It was confidence. Your dad might have smoked them on the front porch after dinner. Maybe your mom would shake her head but never say much, because back then, smoking wasn't danger. It was rhythm. It was how people thought, relaxed, shared silence. Pall Mall was different. Long, elegant, the kind of cigarette that looked at home in a suit pocket. Its orange filter and long paper made it feel smooth, sophisticated. But beneath that image was grit. It was a favorite among soldiers and writers alike. Kerouac, Hemingway, the kinds of men who burned the candle at both ends and called it living. Pall Mall carried the taste of ideas and insomnia. There's a photograph somewhere of a man sitting at a typewriter, a Pall Mall resting between his fingers, ash, long and fragile. You can almost smell it. The stale smoke, the ink, the paper. That was life unfiltered, messy, passionate, real. By the 1960s, America was changing. Television screens flickered with polished commercials. Cigarettes became icons. Territon took center stage with one of the boldest lines in ad history. Us Territon smokers would rather fight than switch. Faces with black eyes smiling proudly. It wasn't just selling tobacco, it was selling loyalty. If you smoked Territon, you weren't following the crowd. You were making a statement. Kids saw those ads on the family TV and thought adulthood looked like that. Cool, composed, self-assured. Smoking wasn't rebellion yet. It was belonging. A shared act, almost ceremonial. One lighter passed around, a group meant connection. But brands didn't just represent taste, they represented time. You can map America's story through its cigarettes. The post-war optimism of Lucky Strike. The polished pride of Pall Mall. The cool defiance of Territon. Each one stamped an era, and then there was Viceroy. The thinking man's filter. When filters became the new trend, Viceroy led the charge. It marketed itself as smart, safe, evolved. People believed it. For a while it worked. Its white and orange pack looked clean, modern. You saw it in the hands of teachers, mechanics, salesmen, people trying to keep up with the times. It's strange how something so small could define a person, but it did. You knew who someone was by what they smoked. Lucky Strike meant old school. Pall Mall meant classy. Territon meant bold. Viceroy meant forward. You'd see these brands everywhere. In lunch pails, on dashboards, in the back pockets of jeans, the smell mixed with gasoline, sweat, perfume, and life itself. It wasn't glamorous. It was everyday America, and that's what's gone now. The cigarettes faded, but so did what they stood for. Not the smoke, the spirit, the idea that even the smallest thing could carry weight. You remember walking into a diner as a kid, the air thick, but alive. Every booth had a pack sitting on the table, an ashtray half full. Waitresses carried trays with coffee in one hand and smoke curling from the other. Nobody thought about the health warnings. It was life, unfiltered, lived in real time. When those brands vanished, they didn't just disappear from shelves, they disappeared from stories. You can't find them in gas stations anymore, but you can still find them in memory. In the way your grandfather coughed and laughed at the same time. In the way your parents leaned out car windows. In the way your older brother offered you one behind the garage just to see if you'd take it. Cigarettes weren't just habits, they were milestones. First jobs, first loves, first heartbreaks. Each puff carried a conversation. Each pack held a moment. Now those brands are relics. You might find an old tin sign at a flea market, faded colors barely visible, or a matchbook from a bar that doesn't exist anymore. You pick it up, and for a second, the world smells like it used to. Lucky Strike. Old Gold, Chesterfield, Pall Mall, Territon, Viceroy. 6 names that built the backbone of American smoke, and with it, a culture. They taught us that ritual matters, that pauses matter. That in between the work and the noise, people once sat still and let the moment hang in the air just long enough to mean something. The smoke's gone now, but the feeling, that lingers. There was a time when you could tell everything about a person by the pack in their hand. The brand wasn't just a choice. It was a declaration, a quiet statement that said who you were, who you wanted to be, and what you believed in. Cigarettes were shorthand for identity. They shaped how America looked, talked, even dreamed. By the 1950s and 60s, the cigarette was more than smoke. It was style. Every brand had its own world, its own tribe. And if you were old enough to remember those names, you remember the people who swore by them. Lark was for the modern crowd. Sleek packaging, chrome red circle, filter innovation that promised a smoother drag. It looked futuristic, and that was the point. Lark wasn't for your grandfather. It was for your older brother who had a fast car and a restless soul. You'd see him leaning against a hood, collar up, engine humming, cigarette between his fingers like he was holding time itself. Lark made smoking look like momentum. Parliament was the opposite. Clean, sharp, dignified. The recessed filter made you feel refined, like you knew something others didn't. Parliament was the choice of professionals, of women in pencil skirts, of men in suits who smoked outside office doors before heading back into the hum of fluorescent lights. It was elegance, trapped in paper. Then came Bel Air, soft and cool, menthol freshness in a white and blue pack. It arrived when people wanted change, something light, something gentle. For some, Bel Air was the first cigarette they tried. For others, it was the one they switched to when the years caught up. You'd see it on back porches, long afternoons, radio playing softly, smoke drifting into summer air. Vantage was the latecomer, born in the 1970s when the world was shifting. It promised less tar, more taste. Its round filter looked strange at first, a hollow center, modern and bold. The design made people talk. Vantage was for those who wanted to keep old habits while pretending they'd evolved past them. The kind of person who read the health warnings but lit up anyway, telling themselves they'd found the loophole. And then there was Territon, still defiant, still loyal. That black eye slogan never left people's minds. I'd rather fight than switch. It was marketing brilliance, pride and stubbornness wrapped in smoke. It didn't just sell cigarettes. It sold identity. It sold belonging to a world that didn't compromise. You can still imagine the old magazine pages. Glossy ads of smiling faces, perfect hair, clean suits, and cigarettes glowing like silver trophies. They weren't just selling a product. They were selling a feeling that life had rhythm, purpose, simplicity, that the world made sense as long as you had 5 minutes to light one up. Cigarettes bridged the gaps that words couldn't. 2 strangers could share a lighter and become friends. Lovers could pass a cigarette between them like a secret, while arguments could pause mid-sentence for a drag and end in laughter. There was a kind of intimacy in it. Small moments that filled the spaces between everything else. That's what these vanished brands carried. Not just smoke, but connection. You remember it. The bar after work, ashtrays full, neon buzzing overhead. The conversations that stretched long after closing. The laughter that cut through the haze. You can almost see the packs on the table, a mix of names and loyalties, each telling a story. Lark was for those who chased tomorrow. Parliament was for those who already had it figured out. Bel Air was for the dreamers who wanted life to taste clean again. Vantage was for those caught between guilt and nostalgia. And Tarryton was for those who never gave in. Each one faded differently. When Lark vanished, so did the swagger of its design. The chrome circle, the red seal that looked like something from a space-age film. It was the last echo of an America obsessed with progress. When Parliament faded, the loss was quieter, like the closing of an office after hours. The smell of coffee, paper, perfume, and smoke lingering long after the lights went out. Bel Air disappeared with the summer. Its menthol freshness once promised coolness, calm, escape. When it was gone, so was that soft sense of grace it carried. Vantage never had a goodbye. It just slipped away. One day you saw it on the shelf, the next it was gone. A quiet fade into history, the kind of vanishing only the observant noticed. And Tarryton? It went out swinging. Loyal until the end. People still talk about it like an old friend who left town but never lost touch. Each of these brands marked a chapter in American mood. Optimism, rebellion, progress, denial, pride. You can trace the nation's pulse through the smoke they left behind. Your parents might have fought over money but shared the same lighter. Your uncle might have given you your first pack, half joking. Your aunt might have kept one in her purse, never smoked it, just like knowing it was there. Cigarettes were habit, yes, but they were also presence. A constant, you can still see the ghost of that world. Bars without no smoking signs. Airports with glass rooms filled with quiet faces. Restaurants where the sound of a match meant conversation was about to get good. There's a photograph you've seen. Maybe from your family album, maybe from memory. A man in a white t-shirt, arms folded, cigarette resting on his lip. The sunlight hits just right, catching the smoke midair. You don't remember what he said, but you remember how he looked. Calm, sure, alive. That's what these vanished brands represent. Not vice, not glamour, just presence. The art of existing in a moment long enough to feel it. Before everything got faster, people smoked slower. The flick of a lighter wasn't a reflex, it was a ritual. A moment to think, a way to pause time, even if only for a minute. Now, when you find an old pack at a flea market or in a drawer, it feels like discovery. The paper soft, the color faded, the logo from another world. You hold it carefully, not because it's valuable, but because it feels like proof. Proof that the world once moved differently. Lark, Parliament, Bel Air, Vantage, Tarryton, 5 names. 5 moods. 5 ghosts of America's golden smoke. They built identity in an age before screens and slogans lost meaning. They gave shape to the pauses between work and life. And when they disappeared, a certain kind of stillness disappeared with them. You can almost hear the match strike, the paper catch, the inhale, the quiet exhale. That's not nostalgia talking. That's memory breathing. Because maybe, deep down, you missed that rhythm. When people took time to talk, to think, to feel. When smoke wasn't pollution, but punctuation. The world changed. But the image of those brands, those names, those moments, they still hang in the air, waiting to be remembered. It didn't happen suddenly. The smoke didn't vanish overnight. It faded, slowly, quietly, like the last drag from a half-burned cigarette left forgotten in an ashtray. One day it was everywhere, woven into every corner of life. The next, it was a memory you could barely touch. There was a time when the scent of tobacco lived in every space. The bar, the diner, the bus stop, the office break room, the movie theater. It clung to the air, to coats, to hair, to everything. It was part of life's rhythm, the invisible thread that connected strangers. But when it began to disappear, so did something else, the unspoken permission to pause. The first shift came in whispers. Laws changed. Ads vanished. Cigarettes were no longer cool. They were condemned. The people who smoked began to shrink from sight, stepping outside into alleys, into corners, into rain. The glow of a lighter became something secret, not shared. The public ritual turned private. The brands started falling like dominoes. One year it was Tarryton, then Bel Air, then Lark. You walked into a store, looked at the wall of new labels, and realized your brand was gone. The clerk shrugged. They stopped making it. That was it. No farewell, no ceremony. Just gone. The shelves filled with new names, sterile, calculated, stripped of identity. They all looked the same. No personality, no pride. Just another product in a world that forgot how to feel. You remember how it used to be. Lighting a cigarette wasn't just a habit. It was a punctuation mark. A moment between moments. You'd finish a meal and reach for one. You'd take a walk and think better with smoke trailing behind you. You'd share one with a friend and somehow talk about things that only came out when you weren't in a hurry. But when the smoke left the air, the silence grew louder. Some people said it was progress. Cleaner air. Healthier lives. And they were right. But progress always takes something with it. Something harder to measure. The smell that reminded you of your father's car. The small act that gave your hands something to do when words ran out. The shared lighter that turned strangers into friends. You remember the ashtrays? Every home had them. Heavy glass ones, round metal ones, cheap plastic ones from gas stations with logos printed on the side. They sat on every table, every nightstand, every porch railing. They were as common as clocks. And when the cigarettes vanished, so did they. You could walk through an entire house and not find one. Just clean surfaces where they used to be. It's strange how objects carry memory. An old ashtray found at a flea market can transport you faster than any photograph. You hold it, feel the weight, see the faint burn marks, and suddenly you're back in a living room full of laughter and low light. The television humming, the smell of coffee and cigarettes mixed together, the quiet sound of someone tapping ash and thinking. That's what we lost. Not the smoke itself, but the space it created. Cigarettes built pauses into life. They gave people permission to stop, even for a minute, to look out a window, to breathe. Now people scroll instead. Different habit, same need. A replacement for silence. But it's not the same. A cigarette burned slowly. Time had weight back then. Now, everything moves too fast to notice. The people who smoked those vanished brands didn't talk about nostalgia. They didn't think they were living through anything special. They were just alive, in the middle of it. That's what makes memories sting. Realizing the ordinary moments were the ones that mattered most. You can still picture it. The dim glow of a bar in the 1970s. A Pall Mall sign flickering on the wall. Laughter cutting through the haze. Someone playing pool, someone telling a story, someone lighting another cigarette. The air thick but alive. That world's gone, replaced by silence and screens. When the smoking bans came, it was like someone turned down the volume on public life. Conversations ended earlier. Nights felt shorter. There was no reason to linger. Without the ritual of one more smoke, people stood, paid and left, and the ads, the billboards that once lined highways, the TV commercials with deep voices and bright smiles, all vanished too. The slogans that once defined eras became artifacts. I'd rather fight than switch. You've come a long way, baby. Come to where the flavor is. Those words used to fill living rooms. Now they live only in the corners of memory. For those who remember, it's not about wanting them back. It's about missing what they represented. The humanity in the in-between? The way a person's lighter said more about them than their phone ever could. The way time used to stretch, not shrink. You remember the sound. The soft flick, the inhale, the brief crackle of paper catching flame. A small sound that meant the world was slowing down. That sound is gone now. There's an image burned into history. A man in a white shirt and black tie, sitting in an empty diner after closing. Coffee cold, cigarette half gone. Staring out the window, lost in thought. That image doesn't exist anymore, not because we changed how we think, but because we lost the symbols that made us look inward. And that's the quiet truth about disappearance. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just fades until you can't tell what's missing, only that something feels off. The vanished cigarette brands didn't die. They dissolved. They became whispers in old movies, ghostly props in thrift shops, names that make you pause when you hear them. Lucky Strike, Chesterfield, Old Gold, Pall Mall, Lark. Bel Air, Viceroy, Territon, Vantage, Parliament. 10 names that once filled the air with meaning. Now, they live in stories. In the way your grandfather's car smelled, in the way your mother cracked the window on long drives, in the way your friend leaned against the hood, smoke curling upward while he talked about dreams he never chased. The disappearance of smoke wasn't just cultural, it was emotional. A shared language gone quiet. We replaced it with health, order, and clean air. But somewhere along the way, we lost that part of ourselves that knew how to sit still, how to look around, how to wait without rushing. The smoke disappeared, but the longing stayed. Because the truth is, people don't miss cigarettes. They miss what smoking meant. A slower world, a simpler rhythm, a pause that mattered. And even now, when you pass someone on a sidewalk, lighting one in the cold, there's a flicker of recognition, a tiny connection to the past. You can almost hear the echo of a vanished America, one drag at a time. You don't realize the end of an era when you're living it. It just feels like another day. You light up, take a breath, and think the world will always smell like this. Faint tobacco, wind, and time. But one day, it's gone. The smell fades. The smoke lifts. And you realize you were standing inside history the whole time. For millions of Americans, the last puff wasn't just about quitting. It was about saying goodbye to moments, to people, to a version of the world that no longer exists. When the last of those cigarette brands vanished, so did something invisible, the texture of life. Your father probably had a brand. Everyone did. Maybe it was Chesterfield. Maybe Lucky Strike. He didn't choose it because of ads or prices. He chose it because it fit. It matched his voice, his job, his truck, his music. He smoked the same kind for decades, and when it disappeared, he didn't switch. He stopped. Not because he wanted to, but because the choice that once defined him was no longer there. That's the quiet heartbreak behind vanishing things. It's not that they were perfect. It's that they belonged to people who didn't ask for much. Just something steady to hold. In old photos, you can spot them everywhere. Men outside factory gates, shirts untucked, smoke rising against the morning sun. Women in curlers on porches, coffee in one hand, cigarette in the other, half smile on their lips. Teenagers pretending to be older, flicking a lighter they barely knew how to use. Every image feels like it's waiting to move. Like if you stare long enough, you'll see the ember glow again. Cigarettes were once a bridge between generations. Your grandfather offered your dad one when he turned 18. Your dad swore he'd never do the same, and maybe he didn't, but the gesture stayed. That small moment of passing something on. Now there's nothing left to pass. No pack, no habit. Just memory. The world cleaned itself, as it should have. Laws changed. Health came first. That's the right ending. But part of growing up is realizing that endings come with trade-offs. Cleaner air, quieter nights, and a certain kind of connection gone. Back then, every break had smoke in it. Factory whistles blew, and men gathered in small circles talking about baseball, wages, life. Office workers stood by open windows, sharing gossip and stress. College kids sat on dorm steps under streetlights, smoke drifting upward as they dreamed about what came next. Now, breaks are silent. Heads down, eyes on screens. The pause still exists. It just looks lonelier. The cigarettes vanished brand by brand, but their ghosts stayed. In music, in film, in stories. When a character lights up in an old movie, it feels like a portal. Like watching someone perform a ritual that once belonged to everyone. Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca, James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, Marilyn Monroe at a party, cigarette glowing like a secret. They weren't smoking for shock. They were smoking because that was how people breathed between words. That's what these vanished brands captured. Humanity's pauses. When Lark disappeared, it took with it the sound of young men trying to look cool. When Bel Air faded, it took the calm rhythm of long summer afternoons. When Pall Mall went, it took the scent of old diners and neon nights. When Viceroy left, it took the feeling of middle-class confidence. Steady, quiet, proud. And when Chesterfield finally disappeared, it took the American handshake with it. But even in absence, they left fingerprints. In the old signs still hanging over rural highways. In the boxes found in glove compartments of cars that haven't started in decades. In the yellowed ads inside Life magazines, smiling faces holding on to forever. You can almost smell it again if you close your eyes. The mix of tobacco and rain. Gasoline from the station down the road. Coffee brewing somewhere nearby. A world that moved slower, that stayed in moments longer. And maybe that's why nostalgia hurts, because it's not about wanting the past back. It's about wanting you back. The person you were in that moment. The world before it hurried. The people who taught you that nothing lasts forever, but some things stay anyway. There's an old matchbook in your drawer right now. Maybe from a diner, maybe from a motel. The logo faded, the cardboard bent. You can't throw it away. You don't know why, but you know that when you touch it, something stirs. A memory, a smell, a sound. It's not about smoking. It's about proof that a piece of your story still exists, even in something as small as that. The last puff wasn't just the end of cigarettes. It was the end of pause, the end of waiting, the end of slow. People don't lean on railings anymore. They don't stare into the distance with smoke curling above them. They scroll, they move, they fill silence with noise. The smoke was our silence, our thinking space. If you're old enough to remember, you know what that silence felt like. It wasn't empty. It was alive. Maybe one day, someone will rediscover those old brands. Not to smoke them, but to study them. To understand what they meant. Maybe a historian will find a box of Pall Malls and realize it wasn't about nicotine. It was about belonging, but for you, it's simpler. It's that moment when you see your father's old photograph. Cigarette between his fingers, smile half cocked. Like he knew something you didn't. You can't smell it anymore, but you remember it perfectly. That smell was life. It was movement. It was now 10 brands, 10 memories, 10 pieces of America that burned bright, then faded into the air. Maybe that's what makes them beautiful, that they couldn't last. Because the things that define us rarely do. They exist for a while, leave their mark, and then vanish, leaving only the warmth they created. You can still find their echoes in the smallest places. A rusted vending machine by a closed bar. A neon sign humming in an antique shop window. A half-empty pack in a box of old belongings. These aren't relics, they're reminders. That once, America moved at the speed of breath, not data. So here's to the vanished brands. To the smoke that built our memories. To the pause that made us human. The world may have moved on, but somewhere deep in your senses, the scent still lingers. Faint but forever. And maybe that's the lesson hidden in the haze. That nothing truly disappears. It just changes form. Smoke turns to air. Memory turns to story. And stories, the good ones, never burn out. You can almost taste the memory. The air before screens, before rush, before silence lost its meaning. Maybe that's why stories like this matter. They remind you that even the smallest things, a pack, a spark, a scent, can hold entire lifetimes. Next time, we're opening another door to the past. The foods America forgot. The ones that vanished from dinner tables but still live in your heart. And if you want more memories like this, there's a small corner waiting for you. Our free newsletter. filled with lost sounds, old recipes, and stories that still breathe. You'll find the link below. Until then, keep the ember of memory glowing. The smoke may be gone, but the story still lingers.